I showed my kids a phone on the wall and I said, what is that? Some of the things that we take for granted today didn't exist years ago. We did not create the car because it was going to put saddle makers and people that handled horses out of business. We did not create the light bulb because we're afraid of candle makers. Progress is never going to be stopped.
Bill Groves, former Chief Data and AI Officer at Walmart and currently a senior partner at Bain Company. Bill sat at the very intersection of data, AI, and retail operations.
The concept of a bot doing my shopping for me, dropping it off, and then put it in my refrigerator for me, that's all near term.
What is the one thing that you think that other companies can learn from the way that Walmart has approached data and AI?
I think their willingness to make
Hello, and welcome to today's episode. I'm Sumner Macon, a partner at Bain Company, where I partner with Fortune 500 companies to drive some transformation. Today, I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Bill Groves. It's a massive pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
So every leader has a sort of origin story. What was it that drew you into the world of data and analytics?
I started a long time ago working in the banking industry, and I was more on the operations side. Started doing some projects involving data and analytics, working with a few companies. One was called Fair Isaac, and we did a project optimizing our decision processes around credit applications and operations and automating it, and kind of fell in love with data and AI at that point in time. And I've been doing that ever since. I transitioned over to that field, and for the past 20 years, I've been focused on data and analytics and AI.
Wow. And what led you ultimately to your role at Walmart? Like, it seems quite a different sort of business to Fair Isaac or indeed the other ones you've worked at.
Yeah, I started in banking. And then I went through multiple companies. I was at Fair Isaac, I was at Dun Bradstreet, where I ran data and analytics at Dun Bradstreet. And then I wanted to try some different industries. And I was more interested in seeing how data and AI was applied to other industries. So I wound up actually at manufacturing. I was at Honeywell. And I ran data and AI for Honeywell, and then had the opportunity to join Walmart, which to me was kind of the Mount Everest of chief data officer jobs. So it was an opportunity and a challenge that I really look forward to.
So as the Mount Everest of data and analytics jobs, I can only imagine the scale. Like, what struck you most about that?
The scale was massive. It was always interesting. That's just the amount of data or the dollars involved when you're looking at how much an effort would cost or how much the opportunity was. And that was always something that took a while to get used to. And now when I work with clients or even in my past life, the numbers are very different. So that was always the thing that caught me, just the sheer of it. The amount of decisions they make per minute, per hour, the amount of products they sell. There's some really interesting stats there.
So with all that going on, how did you decide, like, this is my core mission, this is where I'm going to go after? Well, there's so many decisions being made so speedily across such scale.
You know, when I was at Walmart, it was kind of the beginning of the data and AI journey for them. So really it was about laying the foundation. We recognized that. That was the reason they brought me in. They recognized they needed to focus on the data foundation so that they can do the things you're seeing in market today. And all the companies do that. Companies we work with here at Bain. Yeah. You have to identify where you are on the journey. For them, they were at the point in the journey where they needed to actually create a golden data asset or a good data asset so that they could build solutions off of it that either may increase revenue or reduce cost. And so Walmart had tons of data. They had tons of opportunities in areas for improvement, but many times they weren't able to execute on it because the data wasn't in shape or the point where it needed to be. I started as an analytics guy or AI data science, but transitioned to data when I started to realize how important data was to the underlying aspect of it. And without good data, there's no AI. And so given that was where we started our focus when I was at Walmart.
What do you think it is that sort of separates those chief data and AI officers who really succeed and make stuff happen from those who just burn out, or maybe there's lots of proofs of concept, but nothing ever really happens?
I find there's three buckets of chief data officers. I think there's the bucket that's the pure technologist. They're interested in, are we using Azure versus GCP? Are we on-prem versus, in that part of the conversation. Then you have your pure business centric. All they want to do is a bunch of MVPs. I find the ones that are most successful are somebody that sits in the middle. They can sit in the room with the business and identify what's the real priorities for this company and how do we change the business? How do we, not just incrementalism, but how do we truly change this business with data and AI? And at the same time, they can translate that back to, this is our capability and this is what we need to improve on technology wise. I find, I always joke around and say that, the two buckets, the pure technologists and the pure business centric typically don't succeed longer term, and they're not there more than 2 to 3 years because one, they either burn out or they sometimes get fired. I find that the middle bucket is the ones that actually you see 3 to 5 years where they change the trajectory of the business using data and AI. And that's largely because they can connect with both the business and tech. Chief data officers, I don't have the stats on this off the top of my head, but I believe it's about less than a 2-year life expectancy for a chief data officer today. And I think that's because a lot of them fall in the technology bucket compared to actually interacting enough with the business, which is where the real value comes from.
Yeah, that's incredibly tricky. And you talked about just doing all those MVPs. From looking at what I've heard from Walmart recently is that they're no longer just experimenting with AI, but seeing it really as part of the core infrastructure. So it sounds like the data that you'd fixed and sorted out is delivering that huge amount of value. Like, how do you move from, well, here's a bunch of MVPs to, well, okay, it's now business as usual?
Obviously can't speak for what they're doing there today, but I can say over the course of the other roles I've had, it's always the same pattern with data and analytics. It's always the same pattern, which is you test at the beginning to prove value. Once you prove value, then you have to operationalize it and implement it and build a factory. That's the only way to truly get significant value. Just doing MVPs and doing innovation in itself doesn't drive value. All it does is prove the opportunity. Then you have to implement, but change your business processes, get a roll in line. I always joke around and say, I say it to clients all the time. I was like, building an MVP that the business doesn't actually adopt is a waste of money. Actually does nothing. They have to adopt it. They have to use it. They got to change their business processes. So really it's all about getting to that factory. Generative AI, AI today that we're seeing is actually just following the same life cycle I've seen with other analytic solutions in the past, like optimization, etc. They always start with innovation. They build into a factory. Eventually that's when you start seeing real value.
And so in terms of getting to that value, there's sometimes a tension between, I'll build individual use cases because I'd need to make them. I just need to make some money now and show some impact. And then there's the other view of, well, actually, I need to get my data in order first. But then there's often a very long time before you get to value. How are you able to balance those two things?
I think there's two key things here for me, at least from my learnings in the past 25 years, which is one, you have to do both at the same time. You have to drive value while you're fixing the foundation. Too many, I referenced earlier, more technology-centric CDAOs focus on the foundational technology-wise. At the end of the day, that doesn't actually drive value and it costs money. So if you're spending hundreds of millions of dollars fixing a foundation without doing use cases to drive value at the same time, you're in trouble. That won't last long. So you have to do both at the same time. Drive value while you fix the foundation. As far as incrementalism versus fundamentally changing your business and the way you do business, in my opinion, AI and data is meant to change the way you do business. It's not meant to do small incremental changes. The small incremental changes or the death by 1,000 cuts typically is expensive. Does it drive the return you're looking for? And it typically becomes a burden longer term on the technology side. It becomes legacy debt, right? You look at the companies that have been really successful in leveraging data and AI, they fundamentally have changed the business or fundamentally changed the industry. I love like an Uber or Netflix, two great companies at data and AI. They fundamentally created businesses that did not even exist, or they did, but they totally changed them. And so I find that to be the goal should be that, not the small incremental changes.
Looking at the sort of current AI landscape, the endless news that seems to be coming, where would you say is the sort of the most underhyped or overhyped areas? Like, there's an awful lot of noise, but what's your view of what's happening?
It's an interesting conversation. I find that every new technology or every new data science solution or every new has a cycle of marketing and hype around it, right? They all do. And it doesn't really matter which one it is. This is just the next one. But that being said, we're starting to see real value with things such as generative AI and AI in general. And so I wouldn't say that it's overhyped. I do think certain use cases are sometimes. I think the AI is a long time coming, and I think we're just starting to see adoption of something that's been around for a long time. And I think that's important, right? There's are certain use cases where I find a lot of companies want to do the internal side first. Ultimately, the external side's where you're going to make more money typically, whether the customer side, the sales side's typically the bigger number, but you can get the money many times on the internal side through cost cutting and through capacity and things like that.
Completely. When I'm working with the executives, I find that there can be a lot of challenges in terms of sort of the technology, the talent, the governance, the culture, as well as the pure maths of the thing. At Walmart, where was the biggest sort of challenges? Or
I think
maybe
for
it's all of them.
I would say Walmart is with any company I've ever worked with as a client, as a consultant, or on the client side. When I was on the client side, I would say op model and ways of working is the most important thing and why most companies fail. It's not the technology. You give most CTOs the time and money, they can build anything if you give them
Mm.
the right time and money to do it. But the reality of it is that it's the op models, the ways of working. You see companies that they consider themselves decentralized when the reality is they're not decentralized. They're actually purely chaotic, meaning everybody's doing anything they want. That's just a waste of money and time. You never get enough focus. You never get enough solutions. You never get enough scale to actually make money and drive a solution. So I find that most companies are moving towards like a hybrid model, which is more of a central organization to provide the capabilities, but the businesses drive the value. And I think that's the right model. So I see a lot of companies moving there. But that's usually the number one thing is op model and ways of working. I think is probably the biggest challenge. Governance is very important as well.
Mm.
But I'd say op model and ways of working.
So how do you think about changing the op model to be able to deliver these things at scale? So you mentioned the sort of the hybrid model with some element of centralization, but how do you do that as well as building all the technology and the use case and all those things at the same time?
When you look at it, there's 7 or 8 key components when you look at AI. You have your more business-centric components like data strategy, AI strategy. You have the product, data and AI product type of roles. You have your data engineers. You have platform. You have infrastructure. And I think the key is finding the right owner for each of those components. It doesn't have to all be one. Don't put it all in the business. Don't put it all in the center, right? At the end of the day, things that are more technology-centric are typically do better when they have more of a central component to them. You want to get on the one data platform, don't have 5 owners, for example. And you do want to get to one data platform or one data, at least definition or a common source of truth is where you want to get. So the key is finding the right owners for each. Ultimately, I do think things like AI and data science belong closer to the business because they need to understand the business. They need to understand the data so they can drive value and they need to understand the business priorities. So I think they belong there. So the key as an op model is finding the right one for your company. And every company has a different fingerprint here, right? Or a different footprint. It's finding the right one for their company. Take their 7 or 8, lay them out, figure out which one makes sense for your company. Then figure out what the governance and the ways of working model is going to be. Because you can have, org charts are just lines of boxes on a sheet of paper. How they're
Yeah.
going to interact together to get something done is what really matters.
And from your experience, what is the one thing that you think that other companies can learn from the way that Walmart has approached data and AI?
I think Walmart is incredible what they do. I inherited a lot of it. It was there when I got there. I love their product mentality, how they look at problems and business led, tech enabled. It's business led. Everything's business led. Tech enables it. And I think that's something every company should aspire to or look towards. I think their willingness to make bets. The big bets. Walmart will go all in. They'll make big bets. They've done it in many different places. It's always impressed me before I joined there and when I worked there, and even now as I watch them from afar. So I think those are 2 of the things. But if you look at companies like Walmart, and there's a few others in the industry right now too, they've went all in on AI. There's little to no doubt they're trying to change their business, not incremental changes. They're trying to change the business and possibly the industry with AI.
And thinking about those changes, sometimes I've had seen the innovator's dilemma in, unfortunately, too much real life, as in people are unwilling to make those disruptions that you mentioned. How have you thought about how you talk with executives and indeed maybe the next level down as well to circumvent that problem? Because if you've got a really good business, it can be a challenge to do things differently.
Yeah, I think and this isn't a Walmart thing. This is just in general industry wise, in my opinion. I think the key is actually sitting down and having real conversations about where your business is today, where it's going to be in 5 years, 10 years. A lot of companies don't do that. They just look at what they're doing today and saying, how can I hit my quarterly number? You'll never grow or change your company looking at a quarterly number, right? And I know that's what the CEOs get paid to do. I get it. But the reality is that's not going to change your business. It's not. So having that vision and ambition, where you want to go, companies I see in the space that do things really well say, what do I want to be in 2030, 2035? And how's data and AI going to help me get there? Then you can back down into the roadmap of this is what you deliver by quarter, et cetera. If you're starting having conversations about what I'm doing in the next 90 days without having that vision of where you're going, who knows what you're really building, and you're definitely not going to drive the value you need. I always joke, It's kind of like building a house without a blueprint. You could wind up with 2 kitchens and no bathrooms. Like you need to actually have a strategy, a vision. I always tell companies, go slow to go fast. Have the ambition and strategy. Don't just run and take a bunch of actions. Run and take a bunch of actions is typically a waste of money.
Absolutely, just random.
Yeah, normal stuff. And
Yeah.
most companies do that. By the way, most companies do that. But do diagnostics all the time now, and I've seen on the client side. You know, it feels good to run off and deliver on a project. It's human nature to want to go do that. And the reality is, did anybody actually even ask for that project? Is it tied to the priorities of the company? Is it really going to help us win this battle? And I've seen that at every company where I've come in as CDAO. One of the first things I do is look at the work they're doing today. About half of it typically has no owner. Half of it has not tied to corporate priorities. Half of it has no true end state vision. And the reality is that's action for the sake of action. That's all it is.
And then think about how we actually build the capability. You talked about all those MVPs and turning from AI from pilots into something that really genuinely changes how the business operates. What is it that makes AI scale properly? I mean, you mentioned the operating model, but there seems so many different modes of failure as you've got this sort of collection of pilots and actually embedding it very closely to the business.
Data and AI, in my opinion, is one of the biggest challenges that technologists and businesses face because by nature, everybody wants to be involved and everybody wants to touch it and everybody wants to drive it. When the reality is data and like data platforms and single source of truth typically require less people managing it. And so that's where you get the imbalance between should be centralized versus decentralized, right? So that's why I talked about the hybrid earlier. The key thing is finding a hybrid model, making sure you have the right owners. You don't want 6 different teams owning a data platform. You want one data platform that 6 different teams use. That's like the first step. Then you don't want to have 6 different teams buying AI tooling. You want 6 different teams using the 2 or 3 that the company's got licenses to use, and they all use it. So I always say rules, tools, platforms, right? In order to do it right, a hybrid organization, the central part of it should provide rules, tools, platforms to the decentralized part of it, the business and the data scientist, so that they can actually go do their job instead of doing things they don't need to do. Biggest one probably out there. I love terms like data wrangling. Data wrangling typically just means you don't have data engineering in place. So your data scientists are spending their time doing data engineering that should have already been done for them. And that's what happens when you have a fully decentralized organization. Everybody's just building and they don't understand AI or data. And so those are sort of things you got to look out for. From a technology standpoint, I think is getting some thought and vision around what you want it to be. So when you build the MVPs, that they come together at some point. One of my former companies at one point had 3 different data catalogs, one being built by somebody in the company, 2 different vendors being bought, 3 different business groups. And the reality of it is you'll never get to an enterprise robust capability that scales well with that type of behavior.
Yeah, that's super difficult. You've contrasted companies that sort of try to do it on the cheap, AI on the cheap, and those really want to go all in. What sort of change did Walmart C-suite have to make in order to decide, well, we're going to do this really seriously, we're going to make it happen?
No, I think Walmart, and this is just me now, this is Bill Gross, but I think Walmart recognized that there was fundamental challenges in the retail industry that for them, they wanted to modernize the organization. They wanted to drive significant value, and data was a tool that they hadn't really leveraged much. They had leveraged it, but they felt that there was more they could unleash. So the Walmart executive team was there. Great executive team. They recognized the value of it. They recognized the way to use it. And so there was more of a top down than a bottoms up. And I do think the data and AI space top down is typically better than bottoms up. And so when I see a CDO that reports they're a director that reports 5 levels from the CEO, I typically don't think they'll be successful. When I see where they're at the right level, have the conversations with the right people in the business and the right people in tech, I think that's when you're going to be more successful. And Walmart was there. Walmart was there mentally. Their executive team saw the value. They realized that they were missing an opportunity, and they brought me in to take advantage of it.
Well, that's just awesome.
It was fun.
Yeah, and fun. I think that's really critical. Sometimes I found that there's always a reason to say no. Maybe it's not quite the right time. Oh, there are other priorities. What sort of mechanisms or governance changes will you put in place to make it easy for leaders to say yes when it's concerning AI?
Well, I think you just hit it nail on the head. This is every company. Again, I'm not talking about one in particular. It's always easier to say no than yes, right? There's no risk associated with saying no, or at least there's no perceived risk. When the reality is there's large risk to the company when you just do everything. You fall behind, you never innovate, and that's actually a longer term, bigger risk to the company. And so I think it's a cultural change. Part of it's culture. I've always tried to drive culture where it's okay to say I need help. It's okay to say my project's red. It's okay to say I need more money, because at the end of the day, that's the only way you're going to get things right. So I think the great culture about it's okay to question. It's okay to take a gamble. It's not career limiting to take a gamble. I think it's really important for any company, in my opinion, especially in the AI space, because let's be honest, it is math and science and probabilities, and sometimes it fails. That's just the way it
Yeah,
is.
it does.
It's probability. That's the way it is. And so I think that's really important to recognize it. So I think that was important. I think the being all in, when I say companies all in, it's not a dollar amount thing about saying they need to be all in. It's about the executive team being aligned and helping drive change. Trying to drive change from the bottoms up in data management is a pure failure mode. In my opinion, it's just a pure failure mode. I've almost never seen it be successful. You have to align the senior executives, even at the board level sometimes, then help them push down, because data management and AI requires culture change too. And that's typically where culture change has to come from.
Yeah, from the top. How do you think it will affect businesses at scale when agents start to make more decisions? I don't just mean decision engines in the way that where Fire Isaac or anywhere else has made lots of decisions, but you've got a greater degree of autonomy, maybe. Or do you think that's just too early and we don't know yet?
I think it's a little bit early, but at the end of the day, to go back to your overhead comment a little bit earlier, automation and automated decision making has been around 40 years, right? 50 years. I mean, most of math and science techniques come from like the 50s. And so, and an application of a lot of automated decisioning, adaptive control was in the 90s and the 80s. So I think the concepts have been there forever. The difference is the ability and the compute and the technologies can actually do it today. That was always kind of the challenge, right? And so it's been unleashed a little bit from that perspective. Do I think it changes businesses fundamentally and it changes your talent? It's going to have to. I'll go back to my data management role conversation earlier. I call data engineering. I have an FP&A analyst. I want them doing finance. I don't want them managing data or scrunging data around, right? Agents are going to do that. Agents will take care of that piece of work combined with just a good data foundation. Will take care of that piece of work. Do the finance work. That's what you're getting paid to do. So I think thinking about, in my opinion, how people think about the application of AI will be more important than the actual hands-on component of it in the near future, right? And that's a dramatic change for many companies, a dramatic change. I mean, think about it. There's entire roles out there for organizations to put together their sales reports for Monday morning that realistically, if a CDAO is doing their job, they shouldn't have to do that at all. And there might be 150 of them doing it now. So if you think about the company changes, yeah, I think it's going to drive things. From an autonomy perspective, I think you're also going to have to give them more decision rights and power to take action on that information. And I think that's a change companies have to be used to as well.
Yeah, it's a huge change. And then sort of flipping it from the other side, as consumers start to use the technology, maybe agentic commerce, we're not there yet, but even starting the chatbots, how does that change how retail works?
The retail perspective, this to me is the most fascinating thing to watch, in my opinion, is the agentic commerce side of the world. I think it fundamentally changes everything they do. And I think you're seeing, going back to some of the big bets, big players that are more forward looking, like a Walmart, Amazon, they're all going all in on it to the point where they're rolling out capabilities with, the ability to check out through, it's public information where you can actually check out through the tooling, through the AI tooling. That's a fundamental change. Typically, everything's been about get them to our site and then we can sell to them. When you move that, this is an entirely different change now. Things like impulse buying, basket size, cross-sell products, that's all different conversation. And our company's going to behave different. Are they going to have different capabilities? Is it going to be more about distributing product than it is about actually selling the product face to face? That's a whole fundamental change for the retail industry that needs to be thought through. And my guess is, like any other big change in any other industry, some companies will do it well. They'll succeed. Some companies won't do it so well. Maybe they won't succeed, or maybe they'll shrink. Or, I think this is the inflection point, the biggest inflection point in retail probably in the past. Well, since the internet, I'd say since Walmart and the internet were probably the other two big ones.
And this kind of talk about these huge changes makes me wonder. I've got a 10-month-old little boy. What world is he going to be growing up in? You and I grew up in an age when there were rotary phones.
I showed my kids a phone on the wall, and they asked me what it was. It was the funniest thing. The phone on the wall. I said, "What is that?" And the phone booth. I finally found a phone booth to show them one time. They didn't understand what that was either. So the kids
Wow.
today are living in a much different world. I love the picture. Have you ever seen the picture when the Pope was being elected, and there was one camera being held up? When then the next Pope was being announced, all it was a sea of iPhones being held up with pictures. Literally 1 to probably 5,000 was the difference,
Wow.
right? It wasn't that big of a time difference.
No.
I think today technology is moving faster than ever before. I think you're going to see the changes quicker. And some of the things I've seen some of the research on it recently. Some of the things that we take for granted today didn't exist 10 years ago. iPhone was 2011, I think. When you look at that and think about where we could be in 2035, the concept of having a bot do my shop, actually maybe 2030, the concept of a bot doing my shopping for me, dropping it off, and even having them put it in my refrigerator for me, having using analytics to do quality and products of the food on the shelves, things like that. That's all near term. I don't think any of that's like far out. Autonomous cars, that, let's be honest, that's well on its way to already happening. And somebody told me Star Trek's not a futuristic show. It was actually just a product management document for what exists today. If you think of it that way, and you think about where we could be in 10, 20 years, it's amazing, especially with the advent of OpenAI and Anthropic and some of the things that they're capable of doing with the LLMs that are out there today. Things we couldn't do because of the compute before, we can today. And so I think the health and science advances are going to be incredible. I think the industries are going to shift incredibly. And I think the biggest holdback to that today is actually people in the companies and the consumers. You could already do some things that they choose not to do today because that's not what they're used to. That's the biggest change cycle we're going to have to go through.
Yeah, I think that's a huge change. And we need to sort of help people through that.
I think that's going to be key. I talked to my wife. I joked about her. I was like, I can't wait to be able to go out to a restaurant, have a couple drinks, and have my car drive me home. And she's like, no way. I don't ever want that to happen. And honestly, that, we're already doing it on planes every day. We've been doing it for 40 years on planes. The control science has been there forever. So people just, I think, have to get through that. I think that you need this to really reflect the benefit, the convenience, and how it changes their lives. I think that's what you have to do from a consumer perspective. It's not about, I remember when some of the retailers were rolling out like automated delivery vehicles, right? And I remember sitting having a conversation with some industry executives, and they're all like, well, this is going to cut costs for us, etc. That's not how you sell something to somebody.
No.
You don't say, we're going to make you come out to the vehicle and get your pizza outside off of the vehicle we brought to you in the rain. That's not how you sell it. Now, we brought it to you and it can come any time of day because it's an automated delivery line and an automated vehicle, and we can bring it to you when we normally would have been closed. That's how you sell somebody. That's a different thing. Maybe we deliver, if you deliver by a person, it's X dollars. It's X minus 5 if you use the automated vehicle, pass some of those cost savings on. That's how you sell the consumer. That's how you hook a consumer. And to me, I think that's the most important change. The company side, I think that there's going to be people in companies, just being fully transparent, that see the change, adopt it, and change how they work and drive companies forward. And there's going to be people that get left behind inside of companies. And I think that's unavoidable, and it's something that as executives, we need to really think about how we address that in all the different companies and how we take care of them and transition into different roles, things like that.
Absolutely. That perspective of viewing it through the customer's eyes and viewing through employees' eyes rather than, well, it's just a cost line, because that's just not exciting.
I was in a conversation one time about making some decisions around financials around Christmas time, and everybody was looking at it as a line item. I was in the room and everybody's like, okay, well, that's not a big deal. It's only a couple $1 million, et cetera, et cetera. And the one executive in the room I was very impressed, leans in and goes, that's people. That's jobs. That's customer service. And to me, that was game changing for me, just watching that executive. It was a learning lesson. It's like, this ain't a spreadsheet. This isn't an Excel document. Everything AI touches is people, whether it's going to be different customer experience, whether it's going to be different job experience, different careers. We're going to figure out how to retrain people in the different jobs. An executive one time quoted to me, individual Byron Veller, when I was Dun Bradstreet, and he said to me, it's like, we did not create the car because it was going to put saddle makers and people that handled horses out of business. We had progressed, but they had to have new jobs. We had to think about what they were going to do. We had to think about, we did not create the light bulb because we're afraid of candle makers. You have to move forward. Progress is never going to be stopped. The key is how do you adapt around it? And I think that's the key.
Yeah, completely. We need to help people and actually make people's lives better.
Yeah.
I just find that you mentioned the autonomous cars, and I'm thinking, isn't that amazing that people who are blind or old can, get around so much more easily?
That's a whole population of people that right now may not be able to go anywhere at all and require other people to take them places. It's a game changer for them. Quality of life in your 70s and 80s could be a game changer. Autonomous cars. To your point, Americans and just in general, people love their pets, especially Americans in New York City, things like that. They love their pets. I saw an article the other day that said they actually believe that it will be able to understand through the use of the LLMs and the behavioral science around animals. They're testing on, I think they're looking at some cats and dogs and things like that. That you'll be able to understand what they're actually thinking and saying. I can't imagine that. To me, that blows my mind. But that being
said, that's outrageous.
That'd be great. I mean, they're best friends for some people, right? And so I think that would be incredible. And that's the future. Things like that, we laugh at it now, but we probably laughed at the iPhone. We probably laughed at the autonomous car. We probably laughed at, I remember one of my first jobs ever, I had a gigabyte of data to do a marketing campaign. That was one of my first data science jobs. And now I have 512 gigabytes on my phone. It's amazing the difference you see in the world today.
It's a world. Well, thank you, Bill. It's been really awesome to chat with you.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me, Summer.
Thank you. Bye.